Okay, let's see here. So the Vimeo is recording the screen. And let's see here.
They have to be able to convince me. That's fine.
How's it going?
Hey,
Yeah, so I think I've tested this out a couple of times. So I think I've set up the Vimeo correctly. I know I've set that up correctly at least. Um, I hope that Discord works just fine for you. Um,
that's fine.
cool.
I don't
And
care.
then
Whatever.
let me get my
Yeah, I just had to push the button to turn on the camera.
perfect.
I had a momentary thought maybe I wasn't going to be able to turn on the camera, but it resolved itself just fine.
Perfect. Okay, great. Let's see here. Okay, cool. So yeah, with this one, I kind of I've done one of these before. It's just kind of a like a type interaction or type interview series where can you hear me okay? Is like am I coming through clearly and
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm
perfect?
just trying to move the camera so I don't get the mic in the shot.
Oh no, that's fine. I've done one before and I've typed him, so his type can be questioned. Probably an ENFP, but probably a safe bet. But I wanted to do another one, actually a whole series of just interviewing or interacting with different types to kind of get a sense of what because I feel like you go online and you're researching MBTI and you come across all of the like rudimentary like David Kersey kind of stuff. It's not very in depth. It's good enough. It's not. It gets you started, but um, I kind of wanted to do more of it based around like the cognitive typology aspects,
Are
which
you
I find.
recording it right now?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I
Or are
currently.
you live streaming or recording and publishing?
I'm going to record first and then publish. I wasn't able to
Okay.
figure out how to do the live stream
Uh,
at the same time.
that's
My,
fine. It doesn't make any difference to me. I was just curious.
yeah. I'm not really gonna do any. I don't really edit most of my videos yet, so I don't imagine that would even be necessary, really.
You should start the
Um,
recording over.
yeah. Instead of doing the.
Because it's like that's a really like I have this tendency to do too. I want to give people a bunch of information they don't want to receive, disclaimers and
Exactly, I
stuff,
know. I do that with
caveats
too
and stuff.
too many of my videos. Okay. Well, at least you know what my intentions are for trying to do this series. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think you're right. I think you're
but
right.
you don't need to justify anything to me either. I'm here because I find it exciting to be asked questions and stuff.
Yeah, of
So
course, of
it's like
course.
if you want to talk about cognitive functions, then
Yeah. So to explain a little bit, my when I was like trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to interview this other guy, and do this ENFP interview, I was like, well, I'm lazy, so I'm just going to go for the most efficient. Like, I'll just go through each function and then ask you kind of, how it kind of manifests in your type,
that's a good approach. Yeah, sure.
and then go through each one of them. And I think a lot of them stop at like the first four, your top four, but we even went into the bottom four too. If you want to go into those, I think those are hugely relevant too. So um, you know, but I imagine you'll be more interested in some and then in some. Well, but you're interested in MBTI, you'll be pretty interested, I'm sure, with all of them. Um, but anyway, yeah, the way that I structured the last interview was just, you know, um, starting off with extroverted intuition, then going down the list, and then just kind of, posing general questions, and then kind of getting you just prompting the type to, um, you know, further explain uh, how it how the function works with their type, because it may work differently
Sure.
with it may work differently depending on the type, because when you pair any with ti, it probably would manifest much differently than NEFI, so the functions kind of, at least as I understand it, kind of work together and then can have an influence on each other depending on the type. It's a little bit more nuanced, but
Well,
yeah.
it's like this, okay? There's four fields inside your head, which is internal, like communication, word places outside, external communication,
Yeah.
um, internal experience, external experience. Well, extrovert intuition, it puts objects here and here.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So the thing about it is, when you're an action type like that, whether you're an SE Dom or an NE Dom, because you're able to put data on two fields, either both physical or both metaphysical fields, then it means you're going to be very imprecise about one of those two fields.
Okay.
So in other
Yeah.
words, if I'm an SE Dom, I can still be very precise about words, but then I won't be very precise about my own emotional experience.
Oh,
If I'm
okay.
an NE Dom, if I'm precise about my emotional experience, then I'm not precise about words. Same with SE, so it's one
Yeah.
of the two. And being an ENTP is basically to be somebody who puts a lot of ideas inside of their own head and out in the world, and then concurrently is unable to meaningfully engage their emotions for any purposeful act, really.
Okay. Yeah. Um, and you're basically defining the relationships between your dominant and auxiliary function. The way you're defining how the NE and TI would work together.
Right, but I mean, it's kind of easier to think of it like if you are an action type, you have to be deliberative as well, because
Mm-hmm.
to act from knowledge all the time is to run the risk of there's too much of a risk of like jumping over a wall that is actually a cliff and dying or something, right? You have to
Yeah.
look before you leap if you're going to be leaping a lot.
Right. Right.
So what that ends up meaning is that to be an action type means you have to have a deliberative tool function. But
Oh, okay.
to be an action type with a deliberative tool function means you're able to put information on two fields, and you're able to deliberate about information on two fields, but you have to sacrifice the other two fields to deliberate on. So
Oh, okay.
FI tool with either action function front
Okay.
has to sacrifice being precise about words.
Yeah.
It's like that's the core thing about any type is I think it's about a relationship between two different ways of approaching something that both purport to say to solve a similar problem.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you say that action is paired with deliberation, is similarly deliberation paired with action as well, or
Yes.
okay,
Right.
all right,
So if you're a deliberation Dom, you're either gonna parse objects here. These are objects of identity, like word objects, video, stuff like that.
right.
Or you're gonna parse objects here. These are objects of experience, like physical objects and or how people treat you and make you feel like your feelings and stuff.
Okay, yeah. It's just the difference
So
between.
the difference is that if you're a parser, that means just as the action types have to sacrifice one kind of parsing, the parsers have to sacrifice one kind of action.
Okay, I see. Yeah,
so either
definitely. Yeah.
you can parse out everything great on the metaphysical level,
Yes. Yes.
and then you also can generate a bunch of ideas on the metaphysical level, in which case you can't do anything on the physical level.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah. Oh no, that's the way that you described that so much relates to like something I've identified but have not been able to consciously put into words. At least with my type. Yeah. So with the ENTP, I mean, as I've we all have like with these categories we use, we have our way of like logically categorizing the functions and then understanding how they manifest and relate to each other and everything. And then you have your anecdotes too, and then you have your affect. It's like, okay, what is this is kind of so I find myself when I'm trying to if I'm I don't really do this
You're
formally.
talking about SI and NI, I think, really.
Right. Yeah.
When you're saying you have your particular self and the self that's built of your experience,
Right. Yeah.
then you also have your non-particular self, the self that's built of your intuition.
Yeah.
So that's basically SI and NI.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so what's interesting is people think of introverted intuition as being introverted, of course, but it's intuiting about things on external fields. It's not intuiting things on the internal fields.
Right.
SI knows about things on the internal fields. It knows about your own experience, stuff you've said before, stories you're telling, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it knows about your physical experience.
Yeah. Okay. So the difference between those two then would just be the physical metaphysical difference. It's weird because we're kind of going off on another direction, but it's totally fine.
Because of these things.
Okay. Yeah.
Which kind of objects are on which kind of field?
Yeah. Like today I had a
So
thought.
it's like, go ahead.
Like today I had a thought. I was like, I had to drive, into town to do something, and I was kind of, I was mostly in SE mode. While driving, you're trying to pay attention to everything going on around you actively and respond to all the physical cues and everything. Try to be aware as possible of what's going on physically. And I realized in some way we, at least on some level, NI might be like SE inverted, where it's like SE is like your awareness of your external, experiences on as you'd say on the physical plane, I guess. And then if you invert SE inward, NI would be more of this perhaps internal awareness, or that could be SI too, right? Because I could be talking about SI rather than NI here.
Okay, well, look, here's the main difference. So you can SI begins as object permanence. When a person begins in the world, let's pretend they are a blank slate. And in fact, for a while with little babies, you can play peekaboo. You cover their eyes and you uncover it.
Yes.
And you're surprised to see the thing's still there, right?
Right.
Because they're
that's definitely
their experience. They don't see it anymore. It no longer exists.
Yeah. No, I definitely get what you're saying, and then that kind of
When you learn object permanence, you learn that even that my experience can be trusted. That thing's still going to be there when I look again. I can walk away from it and come back and look at it and it'll still be there. You learn your experience can be trusted to reliably locate things that things
Yeah.
don't move on their own, so
Right.
that if you set things up like Mia, when you come back, you still be like Mia.
Yeah.
So that's the basic premise of introverted sensing. Introverted intuition, on the other hand, is both a shape constancy. So when you're a baby,
Oh, okay.
you see this and you think it's one thing. You see this, you think it's a different thing because it looks totally different, right?
Right.
That's the quality of identity. It's the same thing no matter what angle you look at it. It's an entity, an identity. So NI is about recognizing what is because of that thing that it is.
Yeah.
SI is recognizing what is based on what's happened before.
Okay, yeah. And I definitely see how like object permanence relates to the idea that SI is perhaps more aware of maybe the way things were in the past, and then it's using its past experiences to then make inferences about where the future is going to go based on if they make such inferences. If you're dominant SI or
right,
based on that idea of object permanence, the assumption, this will remain right as I knew it then or as it was, and then I can use that sort of assumption and then try to infer about the future, but it doesn't really take me very far because just as there's object permanence, there's oftentimes there's a lot of impermanence to our experiences too and to the world. So maybe
the thing is the maximal example of SI going overboard would be if an SI person gets struck by lightning in a freak incident, then and they thereafter insist on never leaving the house without a lightning rod, then that's SI going overboard. It's ignoring the reality that you're not going to get struck by lightning again.
The probability.
Just because you got struck by lightning doesn't mean that you're at a high risk of being struck by lightning. You don't need to prevent it.
Right.
But SI, once they experience a problem with something, they afford it weight that's how things are, even if it's a fluky anomaly.
Right. Yeah. Right. You're not a magnet for lightning or anything like that. But so in terms of how does leading with extroverted intuition, how does that, what does that mean to you? And how does it manifest in your overall approach to life? Or maybe
it's not easy. It's not easy being an any dom. It's not necessarily always fun. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I found that it's really difficult for me to deal with projects that are beyond a certain length in time.
Yeah.
So I might spend as much as maybe a week on, say, a song or something. If it's not done by then, it's just I'm done with it. I can't spend any more time with it. I need more novelty than that. Of course, not everything in life that's worth doing can be done in a week.
Right.
So I used to have a little bit more stick-to-itiveness because I guess I had fewer things I was interested in doing.
Yeah.
So I did write a novel at one point earlier, but in my life, and I wrote a novella prior to that. But it's hard for me to settle into a single thing now because a lot of things I'm interested in.
No, yeah, I definitely relate to that as well. And I guess my, since any I'm sure is my second, the novelty. Oh gosh, I mean, the amount to which I relate to that is kind of incredible in the sense that I find that my method then of managing that, maybe you'd relate to this too, is I just try to, when I want to take creative action, I just wait for the proper moment and for the energy to arise. And then I just invest it completely because I know that if I don't, I'm not going to finish it. And it's not going to come from a place of novelty or any kind of inspiration or anything like that, So.
Right. The big difference between an introverted person with any two and an extroverted person with any one is that I'm up and doing the idea as I'm thinking of it, with it before I'm deciding, before I'm recognizing whether or not I'm really even inspired by it. So
Right. Yeah.
it's like
No, of course. Of course. Yeah.
before I really know anything about a creative idea, I've already started like massaging it a bit.
Right. Yeah. No, of course.
Whereas
Definitely.
INTPs or INFPs, they want to wait until they have clarity and inspiration.
Oh,
I
yes.
I just need a little bit of juice, inspiration, and I don't really need any clarity.
Yeah. No, that's fair. No, I mean, I feel like the whole clarity thing is about then deliberating and assessing about whether the product or whether the thing is valid logically, socially, or whatever dimension you're considering. And then, but yeah, I definitely can see how I can definitely both relate and see how inspiration might come second, and then you're acting out the idea better to at least in the moment of conceiving it, um, whatever that might be.
Like I think it's like I don't require a lot of inspiration. It may only be enough inspiration to last me 5 minutes, but I'll probably go. I'll probably be working on something for 5 minutes ago, then go, wait, I don't want to work on this. What am I doing?
Yeah.
So that's an advantage if you happen to stumble into something you do end up wanting to work on. But it's a disadvantage if you want to always work on things worth working on.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's certainly. I'd imagine that it's better. I'm not sure if you'd agree, but it's better at the ideation aspect than the execution, maybe, or other functions would be involved in execution. And
Yeah, well, I
entities.
mean, you can certainly execute. If you're any tool, you have no problem executing on the external metaphysical field, which is say putting out ideas and words and stuff.
Yeah.
It's the like if you're SE polar, then the biggest accomplishment is just uh, managing to do the few little SE steps you got to do, like push record screen, contact me.
Right.
Those are harder than the entirety of actually making the video, which is very, very natural, right?
No, of course, yeah, for sure. And is it? I mean, it's obviously the case based on how the functions line up for each type. That if is there this well, it's interesting because I note that the way that you define NE and SE is they're both within the domain of like interfacing, or am I wrong about that?
No, they're both action functions.
Both action.
Interfacing functions are TE and that's it.
Oh, okay. All right.
So let me show you this picture here. So here's NE and SE. NE establishes objects of
Yeah.
identity here and here, and SE impacts objects and their attributes here and here. Because of course, SE from a like physical matter perspective, SE never creates anything. But from a metaphysical matter perspective, extroverted intuition creates a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So, like the amount of matter on the world isn't getting larger or smaller; it's staying constant.
Right.
It's just changing forms and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I would say SE is impactful, whereas extroverted intuition is creative.
Yeah.
But
No,
of
that's
course,
totally.
if you're sculpting something or whatever, you could say, "Well, I'm being creative with this object." It's true, but you still aren't creating matter. The same way that you create
Yeah,
ideation with metaphysical,
yeah,
talking stuff.
yeah. So it's almost kind of like then that NE is kind of it does it kind of like then poorly interact with like inherently as you've defined it. Does it poorly interact then with on the physical world? Is that just not its thing?
Well, it doesn't is the thing.
Yeah.
So when I say the physical fields, what I mean is for the external physical field, it's everything that's outside of you that is not about any words at all, but still matters.
Yeah.
So like the fact that when I'm driving, and somebody comes to a quick stop in front of me, I need to get out of the way real quick and get around them. None of that is because of any of those words or have anything to do with those words. And in fact, if I try to to use words to parse out the situation in real time, I won't move fast enough to get out of the way.
Okay.
So it's like everything that doesn't involve any linguistic aspect to it or symbolic aspect, everything that's high resolution data in its experiential form rather than low resolution data reduced to some sort of symbol.
Right.
That's the attentional area of extroverted sensing. Now, if an extroverted sensor is in that physical realm, let's say they kind of come up to me and they want to start a fist fight, I'm going to try to use extroverted intuition and address them on the external metaphysical field instead of the physical. And I can say, hey, what are you doing? Don't come over here. But of course, the thing is, each is supreme in its own dominion. And so if it's a bar or something and he's walking over to punch me in the face, I probably shouldn't say, are you coming over to punch me in the face? I should probably get ready to defend myself or run away or something, right? So in other words, if the person with the attentional manner is in their house, their form of action is going to be preeminent.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like with regard to, like reaction to what's happening externally, with any kind of fight or flight situation, you're going to be perhaps acting, or at least forced to act perhaps suboptimally, because they're simply well, you've already kind of done the deliberation. You kind of, I mean, if he's swinging this way, you're going to move another way, and and you're able to define that without words per se. But then afterward, you may analyze the situation, go back and say, well, okay, actually there was something way more optimal I could have done if I'd stepped back and analyzed it from a different frame of mind.
Right. I think when something like a fight is happening in real time so fast, it's mostly SESI. So the thing is, of course, each of those, the T's, the F's, the N's, the S's, they're two sides of one coin, and they're a necessary precondition for each other. So it's like I can't be good at engaging physically with other things in space if I don't, in fact, have a body, and if in fact it's not doing just fine without me paying a lot of attention to it. If I'm paying attention to every little ache and pain and every little twinge I feel, then I'm limited in my capacity to get things accomplished, because getting things accomplished requires you to exert energy and sometimes strain yourself a little bit.
Yeah, that's noise that's kind of blocking the process of that you're describing here. I think with the when your attention's devoted to one thing, depending on what that thing is and how much you're focused on it, you're naturally going to be too divided to engage in maybe other cognitive processes. I guess is a way of putting it.
Well, it's just that you have a finite amount of attention to pay, and there are exclusive options. It's like, do you want to have a entrance to calculus or disinterested? Oh, I want to have both. Okay, well then you want them 1/8, because that means you're going to lose. You're going to lose an action function. Oh, well then I want both action functions. You want the action functions 1/8. Okay, well then you're going to lose the deliberation function.
Oh, okay.
But it's like people who aren't logical, they don't get that. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't both. Well, I'm an INFJ who's got second slot SE or something like that. It's like insane.
Yeah, no, because
it doesn't make any sense at all.
No, certainly, and if we allowed for that, then the system would become, somewhat meaningless, because then you could not. I'm not saying that anyone could be any type.
No, it dissolves into complete meaninglessness.
Yeah.
But so this is where the four things are here: actors, knowers, deliberators, interfacers. Actors either can't be precise with words, or they can't be precise with their experience.
Okay.
Emotional experience, really.
All right.
I guess that which is important to you.
Yeah.
The knowers, they either can't figure out ordinalities, or they can't figure out how to be socially graceful, smooth, or whatever.
Yeah.
Deliberators, they either can't establish ideas or they can't execute them. That's a nice, clear one, right?
Yeah.
You're a deliberator. You can't come up with ideas, you can't establish new ideas, or you can't execute the ideas you do come up with. which is really a catch-22, a shithole to be in.
Yeah.
But
So what you're saying is
the interfacers, they either can't link to experience, they can't link to identity. In other words, they lose the knowledge function.
Yeah. So you have to
either
be,
they don't
yeah,
ever think their own experience is relevant, or they think their own experience is the only thing that's relevant.
yeah. So having this thing then entails not having this other thing, depending on how that relationship works and the things we're talking about. They've got to be lacking it if they're possessing this. So basically what you're saying is, if I possess this, I would lack this. And then depending on how we switch that, I would then possess this and then lack this other thing. Depending on whether I'm an interfacer or a deliberator, or, which is not to say much, but is another way of putting it, maybe.
It's like, look, you have your two knowledge functions 4, 5, like me, in which case they're both relatively conscious and active, but neither of them can be counted on for shit.
Yeah.
Or you've got your two knowledge functions 1, 8, in which case they both can be counted on to be very robust.
Yeah.
But 8 is totally unconscious. So it's not really going to be at your beck and call or anything. It just sort of happens when it happens, it doesn't when it doesn't. It's why I have trouble following through on. It goes part and parcel with 4 slot SI, which is poor consistency across time.
Yeah.
If you want your deliberation functions 4, 5, you get both of them pretty conscious, but they're both pretty. You can't count on them for shit. And then if you want them 1, 8, only one of them is really conscious. The other one's autopilot and kind of subsumed by the first one.
Okay.
So it's like, if you want it third, then you got the other one polar. So it's like, if I'm FE, let's say I'm TI third.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm necessarily going to be TE polar, and that means that by being so selfish about language logic, I'm blind to non-language logic.
Yeah. So that's interesting, though. Like, and then, I see. So non-language logic would be like interfacing like SE then, and then
no TE and F.
Oh, TE and FE.
So,
okay.
Look, here's a TE and FE page. So, TE engages with object systems, really, down here.
Okay. Oh yes, certainly.
We should say it's adaptably, it's responsibly engaged with us. So physical systems that are dynamic physical systems will be understood and broken down and converted into objects up here that people can understand. Well, this is the way this works, and this is, if you want to accomplish this, all of these steps, that's a TE establishing an object here, but it engages dynamically with systems here. FE is the other way around. It establishes objects here and it engages dynamically up here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost
so basically it's like FE is a way to convert physical data into metaphysical objects, and FE only deals with the physical aspect of itself in terms of objects, people's facial expressions, laughing, whatever, things they convey about their emotions are just objects on the physical plane, but they become engaged meaningfully with the language on the physical plane.
So the difference between them really is just that they're focused on two different kinds of systems or objects. Then FE being focused on what you're describing is, like you said, the facial expressions, atmosphere maybe, and then TE is not so. They're both interfacing, but it's just that they're focused on two different things. Or different things.
Yeah, FE is focused on, both of them are focused on systems that require responsiveness. So, like an action deliberator.
Okay, that's a very good way of defining it. Yeah, that's good.
An action deliberator would want to make their whole case, and then you have your turn, and then I'll tell you why you're wrong. You tell me why I'm wrong. Blah blah blah. At the end, it's kind of zero sum. One person wins.
Yeah.
An interfacer wants to engage dynamically with the other person. Basically what their goal is, and they want to figure out what they're going to say to the person as they talk to them, because they're kind of reading the other person.
Yeah.
Well, what is this person looking for? What can I offer or provide this person that will make them like me more and allow me to gain benefits from them more? You could also think of TE and FE as TE is, I can solve this myself. FE is, I can figure out who to solve this for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that's also how I would define SE and TE, or not SE and TE. Sorry, FE and TE. Um,
Uh, yeah.
and so on the topic of like, so you know, how does FE play into the ENTP?
Well,
Does it become,
it's
is it a source of strength, or is it kind of like, what is it? Does it have more of a, you know, do you
it's
feel
a
like you have facility?
yeah, people have a childish relationship with their third slot. So um, FE third is kind of like, look, mom, I can make people like me. TI third is like, look, mom, I can protect myself by appealing to fairness.
Right.
TE third is, look, mom, I can figure out how to tie my shoes or something, or I can figure out how to solve this problem. This actual problem, not a like a workbook problem.
Yeah.
Um, and then uh, FI is, look, mommy, I know what's precious.
Yeah.
And NE is, look, mommy, I've got some words to say.
Yeah.
And SI third is, look, mommy, I can take care of myself, sort
Yeah.
of.
I mean, on the level
SE
of
third is, look, mom, I can do stuff. Look at me
yeah,
go.
yeah. I mean, on the level of words, though, like how how does having NE dominant and FE, tertiary, to put it that way, like, are there particular, like, if we were to analyze the speech patterns of different types, would be able to say, like, or be able to make good inferences about where a person's coming from, and sort of, you know um, not really what their type might be, but at least what function they're using as
You probably
manifest.
could do a lot with type. Even you could determine a lot about a person's type just by their speech patterns. But I mean, the reason I don't typically use that is it's something you have to NI. You can't really articulate precisely what your
Yeah,
criteria are.
exactly. Yeah,
So it's like NTPs talk very similar to each other, but ENTPs are more expressive emotionally. And that is because of the FI polar, really. We grow up thinking that people expressing emotions when they're talking is part of how you talk well, not not um, not indicative of information that matters.
right. Yeah. No, I feel like
In other words, it becomes a presentational thing.
oh, right. Yeah. I mean, is FE kind of the domain then of like tones, and the not so much what you're saying, but how you're saying it, and there's
Absolutely.
there's a sense of
And,
a
and in fact, I was married to an FE dom, and we used to have that fight all the time. I'd say, listen to what I'm saying. She'd say, listen to how you're saying it. I said,
yeah,
well, I wouldn't have to say it this way if you weren't so fucking stupid.
yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I mean, having an FE parent, I definitely had that problem as a kid, where oh gosh, if I deviated from a
I
tone,
never actually said that, by the way.
yeah, no, if I deviated from a
This is crap. I never told her that. Okay, I never
yeah,
actually said that to her. So I
yeah,
just want to make sure everyone is aware that I did not actually say
no,
I wouldn't
no,
have talked to you like this. You were so fucking stupid. I
yeah,
said things equivalent. Okay, but not. I mean, things meaning that, but nice, much nicer sounding.
yeah. I
Like, well, if
mean,
you would listen to me,
yeah. I mean, it's just weird that FE has its tone standards, like, as if, like, and it ends up mattering, because if enough people are FE, then it does matter, and then we have to just kind of operate within the TE frame of, like, well, okay, I've got to concede that matters, so I'll adapt my tone, um, or else we're just kind of blabbering off to each other with no, with no.
I mean, I think what it boils down to is it's like people have some basic needs. From a cognitive function perspective, the basic need is to close the gap between their map and territory. But from a acceptance perspective, most everybody has a need to be perceived, or feel as though they're being perceived as either competent or warm or both.
Yeah,
It's more important usually for most people to be perceived as one or the other. So I like being perceived as warm, but I not at the sacrifice of being perceived as competent.
okay, for sure. So you're not willing to sacrifice precision for presentation then.
I mean, I am generally not, but the other thing is the second and third functions are interesting because they work best when they work in coordination with each other, and growth has a lot to do um, with your second and third functions making up in terms of values. So it's like when I was a little kid, first it was all FE, and then I realized, and for stretch, it was like, okay, well, why do I do things? Well, because that's going to make the teacher happy, and then I'll get that little rush of praise or something.
Right. Yeah,
And then I
exactly.
realized it was kind of hollow. And then first stretch was like
Meaningless. Yeah.
all TI, like fuck everybody's feelings and blah
Oh
blah blah
no.
blah.
No, no.
But
Yeah.
then I realized I didn't like not being liked. So it's like you kind of bounce back and
Oh no.
forth until you find that you're best off if you can couch your correctness in language that affords the other person the assumption of competency as well.
Yeah.
Because people who don't tend to perceive themselves as competent, more likely to perceive themselves as warm, they don't need to be scolded for their incompetence. The people who do perceive themselves as competent, not warm, won't be open to your critique if you don't allow them to keep their competency.
Yeah. I just view the whole thing of like tone standards and everything as, it's about people have a sense of people want to be respected and they want to be, you know, seen as having dignity and everything. And I think it all comes, back to that in some way where, we adopt certain adaptations, and we do that because we're just, trying to show that there's that we're not apathetic or something like that, or that we have respect or whatever. And I felt that FE my experience with FE growing up was always like, well, that's not very respectful, um, or something like that. Some kind of like what I always would be like, well, that's not substantive or anything like, that does that really matter? And then and so I similarly kind of had a period growing up where it was mostly FE as a kid, and then when I reached teenage years, it was TI came out, and then I was a little bit just totally not totally uncaring, but way less caring of FE. I don't know why.
You learn to unfurl your middle fingers.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure why it happens that way. I mean, there seems to be some similarity there, maybe across types and how we develop into our type. Um, maybe childhood to teenager to adult is like you're developing into your type, and then I almost feel like when you're maybe later in life, like I'm talking much later, I'm talking like late 70s 80s, you're developing, maybe developing out of your type, or because you'll notice there are changes across
Well,
time with
okay, so here's what I think about this. First of all, I think people are probably born their type, but if not, then they're typed by like 1 year old.
yeah,
If they aren't born their type, they're born their dominant, and their tool comes in a little bit later. That's what I think. I don't have any good reason for this. I can't really justify it except for the anecdotal stuff, but
yeah. Well, I mean, I
this is
noticed
what I
with
think
the
anyway. Now,
yeah,
as far as growing out of your type, the thing about a type is it is a configuration of attentional manners, and you never stop using that configuration of attentional manners. But it is the case that, especially if you've got SI somewhere in the front stack, that you will learn from your mistakes, and so some of the life experiences, impacts, statuses, etc., um, that are associated with, say, weak SI will cause you less problems as you get older. Like my I still make SI mistakes.
oh
Everything
yeah,
about my channel is an SI mistake. It's a lack of consistency in some sense, right?
yeah,
But
well, yeah,
despite that, I make this scope and scale of my mistakes in that area get smaller as I get older,
yeah,
and in a lot of areas.
yeah,
So I suspect that NI people, whether it's on the front stack or not, they too they have mechanisms by which they take meaning away from their experiences and grow accordingly. It
yeah. No,
probably
of course.
least so ENFJs and ENTJs, but
Yeah. Well, in good SI fashion, you're going to grow from experience. Everyone's going to have that. Everyone has SI to some degree, so we're all going to do that. And maybe the strength of your SI, speaks to your ability to do that, to learn to adapt according to past experience and everything. So it might vary between types, but it seems to be universal and for people. But with the kid thing, like noticing it in kids, I think you do. I mean, I think that I would agree. I don't know if I think it's a nature nurture dynamic, of course, to some extent, but I think it's a lot of it is nature too. Like with kids, you notice, just speaking from my own understanding of the functions, you'll notice NE with kids and I with Y questions, and then they're a little bit more chatty and ideational and creative and everything like you see with kids. And
Some of them are.
yeah, right.
Look, I've been a school teacher for a long ass time.
Yeah.
I taught fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. I even had fourth graders for a while.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you is they're exactly like adults. I've typed shit tons of them.
Oh yeah,
when they are unipolar, they've got no ideas.
Yeah.
My sixth grader Chloe, she doesn't have a single fucking idea I can drag out of her no matter what.
Yeah,
it's crazy how non-ideational she is.
Right.
But she also is blazing through the logic curriculum.
Right.
She's an ISTP.
Yeah, for sure.
Doesn't matter how old they are.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to prove that TI is an intentional manner. The deductive reasoning is an intentional manner and not a skill you learn in school. Just give it to a group of 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. Some of them will be able to totally learn it super fast and get it right away. And some of them, you could spend years hammering it into their heads and they won't get it.
I know.
It's not because there's something wrong with them. It's because
they think
they're not configured to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like we recognize the fact that in vehicles, we've got buses, we've got dump trucks, we've got motorcycles, we've got mopeds. We don't try to take a load of dirt on our moped.
Yeah.
Because we recognize that it's not designed for that. Similarly, we don't try to zip through traffic in our dump truck.
Yeah. I always think about, well, not always, but I often think about, how how it relates to your brain, because like for a while I was kind of interested in, how our brains are structured and everything and the neuroscience aspect of it. I wonder what the correlations are for, just how different regions light up and the activity in different regions associates with different functions. And, maybe there are other, I think there have to be correlations, right? Because I don't think that, personally, I don't
I'm
think
quite sure there are.
Yeah.
Quite sure there are. Unfortunately, Darian Nardi seems to have seized the ground in terms of the brain scan stuff, and he's doing fucking stupid.
Yeah, I don't think it's very good.
It's like I can't, because I have zero ability and zero faith to trust his ability to type anybody or to have their types right. The people he's bringing in and then doing brain scans on and collecting data on, there's no other side to it, right? There's no concretization of the other side of it, so it doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you really want to do that correctly, and establish something that is statistically meaningful and prove something, what you would do is you'd get a baseline of, like, you find one person who's typing them, like me, for example.
Yeah.
And you'd say, okay, here's a baseline of two of each of a couple of types, a few types that Eric says is INFJ, blah, blah, and take their brain scans, right?
Yeah.
And then see if they match up. Ideally you do with a large pool of people. I say, here's 10 INFJs that I am convinced are INFJs. Here's 10 ENFPs that I'm convinced are ENFPs. Here's 10 INTPs I'm convinced are INTPs. Now, when you do brain scans on all those, then you compare those brain scans, and I might not be perfect, but if there's something to what I'm saying in general, or what everybody say about cognitive functions, but if cognitive functions are right, then those brain scans will look distinct, and they'll look similar to each other.
Yeah.
Of course, to really do it properly, you need to attach these brain scan things to somebody going about their business for like a full day. Then you get an authentic sense of
course,
how their brain lights up, because putting them in a laboratory setting, attaching brain things to their head,
I agree.
It sort of pushes them out of their native way for a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, maybe.
Better yet, multiple days, if that's even possible. there are always limitations with technology we use to measure things, but um, yeah, you'd need a sample of both people and time. You know, you'd have to get
Right.
you'd have to observe them
Yeah.
over time, doing different things, and but you know exactly how you empirically go about testing each function and then trying to correlate. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to correlate it with different regions, because from I didn't read all of his book, but the Dario
I
Nardi guy
mean,
you're talking about,
yeah, so right. It's like, let's say extrovert intuition is represented by the so-called Christmas tree brain.
yeah,
You
right,
say that it lights up in random spots all over the place or whatever.
yeah,
Um, but then if in fact cognitive functions are right, if you put one of those things on an ENTP, that will, for a stretch of 12 hours, that will comprise a majority of the light patterns.
yeah, yeah, for
And
sure.
if we're wrong, if you're wrong that that's linked to any, then it won't. But the thing is, I don't really know enough about what the methodology being used to scan these brains is.
Yeah, yeah, for
What
sure.
like I need to know a little bit more about it to talk about it intelligently, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny too because you have your got your frontal lobe and your cerebellum, but you got your self preservation part of your brain too, like the lower part, your fear center and everything. I'm wondering if like self preservation links somehow to management of health, which then relates to SI. So maybe then SI people, would have more activity in this area, and there's this link to self preservation that's there with SI, which comes to like knowledge of body and how to manage this thing and so if I'm understanding SI correctly, because I know one of the things you do is like, do you know how much sleep you need and do you and how much time do you spend a day on your taking care of. I mean, I maybe you feel this way too about like SI stuff, having the dominant any as an ENTP. Does it kind of just feel tedious, like, and generally like just like boring and mundane stuff when it comes to taking care of SI things? Like, I don't know. I mean,
It's not so much tedious as it is the thing I always put off too much and wish I had done a little bit more of.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So it's many is the occasion when I say, okay, after this, I'm going to take a bath and try to SI reset. And like 3 activities later, I go, okay, after this episode, I'm really going to go take a bath and SI reset.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder how this links to like I know because I mean I even can't like maintaining consistent exercise stuff like that. I feel like that could be associated with either SI or SE maybe, and then I just can't maintain it because I don't have those. I don't feel I really have those very strong.
I think the types who are most likely to start and maintain for a little while and then quit and then start and maintain for a little while, various things like that, exercise routines and stuff,
Yeah,
are actually SE fourth people.
yeah,
INTJs, INFJs.
yeah,
So they'll go through different periods of right, like, well, for a while I rode my bike every day to work and I lost 30 pounds, and then
then I stopped.
like, well, then what happened? Well, then I put it back on.
Yeah, yeah. No, I.
But we can't. It's not just exercise. The exercise thing is doing exercise consistently
It's not
is
just
a
SI.
good way for an SE polar person to conceive of what an SI SE combo thing is, because
Yeah,
it's like whenever people intuitives with expert intuition in the first or second slot, we're not really ever much motivated to feel the burn.
oh gosh,
It's not a pleasant experience, really, and it takes discipline to push through.
Yes, it
Except
does.
almost all of our motivation comes from metaphysical inspirations, not physical ones.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're very undermotivated to persist in anything that's physically uncomfortable for very long.
Yeah. And so, do you have like? Would you say that like with physical discomfort, you know, like with your relationship to SISE, is that pretty intense? Like as a kid, I remember as a kid, like I couldn't stand like certain sensations because they were just absolutely horrible. Like the feeling of, I can distinctly remember, you know, in the barber shop, you get that fucking tarp that they put on you, the plastic thing, and it helps the hair fall off so that it doesn't stick to anything. The feeling of that around my neck, I can remember as a kid. I could not. I can't even. I can barely handle it now. I don't know how that relates to. Maybe relates to type.
I'm not sure. That's probably more of a third slot thing of SI if it links to it. My experience with SI is more like wanting to cry because I stupidly left the house for this football game without a jacket again, and I'm freezing, and I didn't drive, so I have to wait.
Oh, God, that's horrible. Yeah.
Or we went hiking. We decided to go hiking when I'm like, sometimes I did a lot of that stuff with my teens and 20s and stuff, but
yeah.
And you start off bright and early at 7:30 in the morning. I don't need any breakfast or bring any lunch with me, and just have a bottle of water.
Yeah.
It's like idiot shit, That stuff is what gets me. I do remember finding certain sounds very annoying.
I still
I still find leaf blowers extremely annoying.
Yeah.
I can't stand the sound of leaf blowers.
Yeah. It's calmed down as I've aged, but it's definitely was a thing at one point. Now, I think we've gone through. We haven't really talked about TI much, but I think there's enough knowledge among people interested in it to be able to distinguish between. So you're TI preferring, and does that cause you to? Do you find that might cause you to conflict, like because you're TI preferring? Does that naturally cause you to conflict a little with TE on TE judgments about things? Or are you just indifferent to TE and then just kind of use it as a tool whenever needed? Or is it like...
No, I mean, TI is... it's my default tool function, but it's also an instrumental value, which means I don't actually value it very much in and of itself for my own life. It's what I expect to be able to use when engaging with the world all the time.
Yeah.
So 6 slot is concurrently countervalued for your as with TI, it's an even numbered function. TE is going to be something you demonstrate to the world when you can't get by with just TI, which is most of the time.
Okay. Yeah.
So you also expect the world to demand it of you.
Yeah.
So when you're in a public capacity, you generate pretty good TE if you're in the right context. Like I was the director of a fairly large private middle school debate program that had multiple locations. And I made all the curriculum and made sure all the teachers had the curriculum they needed when they needed it, and made sure there was a sub for class. They did all kinds of shit like that, right? All this TE stuff.
Yeah.
But it was because I was at work. I expect the world to demand that of me. I'm able to give them that when it's when I'm just putting sort of objects with my TE on the external metaphysical field. That is, they making lesson plans and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But when people use TE justifications for things, then it's like, okay, I expect the world to demand of me TE, but I expect concurrently that the world provide TI for their TE. So it's like, okay, I'll give you TE, but you have to make sense.
Yeah, of course.
And so I typically I find TE is my critical parent, as they say. It's the thing you get mad at yourself most for is your 6 slot function. So for me, that plays out as knocking shit over usually, because I stupidly put this drink by my foot instead of on the table.
Yeah.
Once again, like an idiot. It's like a combination SITE failure,
Yeah.
Or if I pick up a thing to carry it across the room and realize that I need to move something out of the way, first I have to put things back down. I go, okay. Those ordinalities, that's what TE is.
Right.
Yeah.
Efficiency,
so
essentially.
I definitely have that that hate relationship with TE
Yeah.
and love-hate relationship with TI. I love it when I'm at work because I got to work. Whatever work, meaning being in public, TI. But I don't really, I hate having to use it in my own life. So I never really correct Rachel or TI, bust her chops much or anything about anything because I don't care. And
Yeah.
I like the fact that it's easy for me to be fair to her and satisfy her by being fair. I don't have to do more than be very fair and she's happy.
Yeah.
That's fantastic because that's her third thought function, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, she doesn't have to be anything but nice and I'm happy.
Yeah. Well,
pleasant, agreeable, affirming, you know.
I know that you have some experience with debate too, and with and both managing it and well, obviously engaging in it, but in the role of a coach, I almost feel like when I watch, it's fun to watch like TE and TI, like especially in like a debate setting. It's fun to watch them kind of knock heads because they're operating on two different. It's like sometimes I'd think, well, it's almost like if I'm seeing TI correctly here, it's like TI is like TE taken one step further, or maybe two steps further, and then occasionally like there'll be some TI justification, like it's for something that's completely valid, but it's almost the difference to me is like one's very empirical, and which is TE. It seems to be a little bit more empirical in its approaches to defining things and doing things, whereas TI can almost, if I were to compare them to like philosophers, like TI is Descartes, like the Cartesian doubt thing, like it's going to question I think as you put it, the frames fundamentally, and as he did, because I mean he just questioned his purpose was in the meditations was just to question. I can't remember the phrase he used, but to find one thing in which he could find no ground for doubt or something like that,
Right.
which is then I think, therefore I am. Whereas I don't feel TE really goes that.
Well,
It's just it's good logic too, but I just don't feel it goes. It's not willing to question per se in that way. At least
well,
as
I
I
mean, the
was
thing
reading.
is this. Look, they're totally different kinds of logic because TI wants to affirm that which is most universalizable. As a consequence, it
Oh yeah, yeah.
it
I'd
tends
say
to
this.
negate a lot more than it affirms. TE, in contrast, has a starting spot where they have a goal and they want to take action to meet that goal.
Yeah,
So the thing is, that has nothing to do with universalizability.
yeah, for
When they
sure.
try to
Oh gosh, yeah,
universalize it,
yeah,
what they do is they just say, well, these are my predicted impacts and they're good.
yeah,
So the thing is, in debate, the competition between TE and TI is long and well established in terms of everybody in debate, especially in like Lincoln Douglas debate, for example. In every debate, somebody's either running some form of deontological framework or some form of utilitarianism.
yeah,
And there's shit tons of different manifestations of it, from rule consequentialism
yeah,
to the mills to fucking Singer's positive obligations. You
yeah,
can run any number of different philosophies or arguments, but they always boil down to the same thing. The conflict here is the utilitarian framework is fundamentally not a normative framework, and whether or not the resolution is a normative or a prescriptive question is
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
is never in resolve. Like, in other words,
It just depends on what you're debating, I guess. Then.
yeah, I mean, in certain circumstances, it's pretty obvious that it should be should be interpreted as a normative question. In certain instances, it's more obvious that it's pretty difficult to interpret it normatively. Or
Yeah,
probably you should go prescriptive.
yeah,
But the problem is when debaters debate the topic, they don't debate it in terms of, well, usually it could, and somebody, I mean, my debaters might run this or something like that, but they usually don't say, okay, based on what the resolution is, what's the appropriate framework? Usually they say the appropriate framework for this resolution is meow, and here's a bunch of reasons why utilitarianism is a better framework than deontology. Not here's a bunch of reasons why utilitarianism is the appropriate framework for this resolution.
Yeah.
Although it's going to be a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
The util side started arguing a bunch of stuff about how since government officials are duty bound to take action without complete information, that somehow utilitarianism is a good thing and necessary.
Yeah.
Well, they're not duty bound to take stupid actions justified by utilitarianism.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like,
I mean, it's a stupid argument. But
yeah,
whatever.
it's like, I guess the one way of putting it's like TE is logic that's constrained by a utility framework, and TI is logic that is not constrained by a utility framework, and that TI is just going to be more theoretical then, and TE is going to be a little bit more aimed at what I can prove, what I can say with under valid standards of evidence.
It's
going to be more
a different standard you check against. So TI, the standard is universalizability, which is to say logical consistency. In other words, if by that reasoning we could do meow atrocity, then we should exclude your reasoning as legitimate and revert to a default of negation.
Yeah.
Whereas the frame of reference for TE is they're comparing against the status quo in terms of measurable things.
Yeah.
So let's say I want to start a school lunch program. I'm going to say, after I'm done giving these children lunch, then their grades will go up and they'll have fewer health problems.
Utilitarianism.
Like that. Yeah. So then if you're operating under that frame of reference, then you're not really concerned about any larger picture questions. You're just saying, okay, how can I maximize the impacts that I care about?
Yeah.
With the resources and approaches that I have at my disposal.
Yeah. How can
of course, the biggest problem is they don't count unintended impacts. TE people need to remember.
Yeah, I agree.
There's going to be a lot of unintended impacts. You need to measure those too when you're trying to make your advocacy. Otherwise, you're really being intellectually dishonest, because you're not only being dishonest about the fact that you're treating utilitarianism like a normative framework when it's not.
Yeah.
But you're being much more dishonest than that if you don't count all the impacts and you're trying to say, well, we should do what I say because of all these good impacts, but you only measure the ones you want. It's like,
yeah,
no.
Yeah. They're trying to point to concrete benefits in the real world and saying these justify the move.
Right. They're saying the ends justify the means, but the problem with outcomes is there's infinite possible outcomes of certain actions, especially if they're globally impactful, like some foreign policy action. How many impacts are there from one drone strike? Well, it's impossible. You could articulate an infinite number of them. Yeah. Whether they're all actually distinct or not is another question, and which ones then directly linked to the drone strike or whatever. Like, okay, did the drone strike cause Susie to commit suicide because she committed suicide not that long after the drone strike killed her uncle?
Yeah.
Well, she did like her uncle, but actually no, it didn't have anything to do with it. Or she loved her uncle so much that's why. Or so some of the impacts are hard to say. Of course, if you're advocating in favor of an action that you believe is going to accomplish a problem that you want to solve or a goal you want to attain, you don't give a fuck about things outside of that realm of analysis. And so you're looking to get what you want done. You're not looking to be fair.
Yeah. With the whole school lunch thing, it's like, the point's like, it does give the poor students an automatic lunch option. But then if it's universal, it just gives the wealthier students 2 lunches. It gives an automatic 1 lunch to the but anyway.
The funny thing is, though, when you make arguments like that against programs like that, they never learn. Nobody seems to ever learn that certain things in life are babies. You can't split the baby and have a good compromise.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and some things in life, compromises are appropriate. If you're trying to figure out, like, okay, well, you think I should pay you this much, and I only want to pay this much. When you compromise, that's a good place to compromise.
Yeah.
If you're saying things like, well, look, I'd like to exterminate all these Native Americans, and you don't want me to exterminate any of them.
Yeah.
So how about we just exterminate half of them?
Right.
That's not a good solution, right?
Well, the problem is exterminating anyone. I mean, it's still. I mean, so it doesn't matter.
Well, you say the problem's exterminating anyone, and I say the problem is there in my way.
Yeah.
So how about we just forcibly move them then? That's a good compromise, right?
Yeah.
No.
Or we could be civil and trade with them, and then we could think of a TE benefit that's more civil. Like, oh, we can trade with them.
Right. I mean, the thing is, you take all the benefits you want, but if basically you're saying, look, we need to usurp their rights over their area here, um, because of some goal that I think is more important,
Yeah.
then at the end of the day, you didn't try hard enough to come up with a good plan. Try harder. If you're going to try to come up with a good plan in which you don't have to run roughshod over some people.
Yeah, definitely. That's politics. It's just it's just coming up with compromises that please everyone, I guess. But um, also, when you were saying about TI like negating things, I definitely relate to that too. I'm sure that then I question myself. I if I'm applying TI, then it's like, okay, I'm going to negate this thing, but I have to remember that I'm also going to have to negate the negation too, because then it leads me to a pattern where it's like I'll just automatically question authority by default. It's like, well, actually, you don't want to. The whole problem is doing things by default. If you're doing that's the problem in principle. So you should have indifference is the better strategy there, or so um, or else
You got to affirm something.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's the
Yeah.
secret that NTPs need to learn, both INTPs and ENTPs.
Yeah.
At some point in your life, you got to stop fighting it and give in and genuinely, wholeheartedly affirm some things.
Right.
Definitely. Direct your passion towards an affirmation, not just towards being correct.
Yeah.
And that's sort of opens things up. I think free will really is attained. People think of it as something that either exists or doesn't. But the reality is, of course, we've got a spectrum of freedom of will. Sometimes we reluctantly do things that we don't want to, but we could get out of, but we don't want to face the consequences of that too.
Yeah.
Sometimes people force us at gunpoint.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have the freedom to choose entirely what we feel like doing. Sometimes we're feeling in a mood that is clear and people making wise choices, and sometimes we're feeling in a mood where we just want to make ourselves intoxicated and go to sleep. So the thing is, free will really, for a meta-analyst, anybody who's got three metaphysical, anybody who's got two metaphysical functions, first two functions, so that's INTP, ENTP, INFJ, ENFJ. For those types, I lost my train of thought.
I think we were talking about yeah. Let's see. Oh, free will.
Okay, free will.
And
thanks. So for the metaphysicians, the meta-analysts, the people with the two metaphysical functions first, I really think that growth happens through map understanding first. So it's like the reason my will is more free now than it used to be is because I understand cognitive functions. It's been hugely impactful on liberating me from some of my
for sure, I agree.
Some of the less mindful expressions of my habitual attentional manners.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean,
so in other words, it's giving me a good reason to not reflexively shit on FI at all times, right? It's giving me good reason to recognize that that I'm just in an imbalanced configuration in one direction like everybody else is, and it just so happens my direction maximally shows off verbal intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and ultimately with the ENTP, I mean, if you're with the ENTP, the TI is very strong too, so it wouldn't just be verbal; it would logical intelligence. If we want to categorize different kinds of, I'm fine with that.
TI is conditional reasoning, whether it's with words or whether it's with A if then B or whatever.
Yeah.
It's still conditional reasoning.
Yeah.
As long as you're talking about things that are the key thing about TI is it deals with objects that have identity, not attributes. So in other words, something as a consequence either is or is not ultimately. It gets collapsed down to a binary distinction.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not clear at which point a few grains of salt become a heap of grains, as per the Supreme Court decision, where there's a famous, at what
It's
point
still
does it become a
salt.
heap? Because
It's
they
still
have some
salt.
words in the Constitution like excessive whatever. Well, at what point does it become excessive?
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know how I got off onto that, but the point is, meta analysts have more free will when they understand the math of it better. Then they can actually make more choices about their responses to things in the world that deviate from their way. Now, with the superphysical types, I don't think that's how growth happens. Like my dad has never been able to, or never shown even the slightest interest, or really even displayed an ability to process quite the concept of having a type and it defining you.
Yeah.
To him, that's just not the way the world works. He's antipolar.
Yeah. Yeah, you said like TI is like identity and attributes. Do you think
No, FI is attributes, TI is identity.
oh, okay, I see. Because I was wondering if identity would be an attribute, or if like identity would then just be, you know, I mean,
No. So like look. So if you were to talk about a physical object such as an elephant,
yeah,
you could describe it, its attributes, and then people would be able to guess what it is. Okay, if you just said, okay, it's big, it's gray, it's got big floppy ears,
right,
it's got a big long nose.
but it could be a big
You'd be able to
mouse
say,
or
okay,
something. Or
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about an elephant. So,
yeah,
in other words, what you're talking about, the whole, is the identity.
yeah,
And the thing about being an identity-based way of reasoning is that we don't care whether you are, even if you're an injured elephant who has had one of his floppy ears chopped off in an accident or something, you're still an elephant.
Yeah.
You don't have to have all those attributes, blah, blah, blah. You're still this thing. Or you're not, no matter how much you look like an elephant.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So that's TI dealing with the identity aspect of things. FI deals with the actualities of things.
Oh, okay.
Like, for example, I might get my feelings hurt because I have unstated expectations of being treated in a fairly specific way that don't get met, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, but of course, how can I have expectations that you meet expectations that I never state?
Yeah. How could I expect you to meet those expectations if I haven't stated them?
Yeah. So the thing is, well, that doesn't matter if you're caught up in the particulars of the thing. It's like it doesn't matter whether it's an elephant or not if currently you're trying to swim out of its belly.
Yeah. So like TI looks at an elephant, like we're talking about. So TI looks at an elephant. Like when NI looks at an elephant, does it say something like?
Well, NI looks at it and says it's an elephant.
Okay.
TI says, and where are you going with this?
Yeah. TI might ask.
In other words, what argument, what affirmation or negation are you making?
Yeah.
In other words, TI assumes people are, when they're speaking, are speaking to affirm statements that they're saying, or to negate statements that they're saying. Whereas like FE, it assumes people are making statements because they want to have a certain kind of social impact, or they, may have been the time when I've been accused of you just want to be right, you just want people to think you're right, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, of course, it's insane because even if that's true, it doesn't mean I'm not right.
Yeah.
That's a TI response to it, right? An FE person would say, well, it doesn't matter if you're right if nobody agrees with you.
Yeah. With me, at times, with having an Enneagram 9 kind of a part of myself, I'm always like, I don't really care. I mean, ultimately, I actually want you to be right because I would want to help you see what happens to be maybe a better way of thinking about it. But I don't know. Maybe I thought, for whatever reason, I thought NI would look at an elephant and say, well, that's a mammal or something. And then TI would ask, what's a mammal? It's a mammal.
And I was a mammal?
And then TI would ask, what's a mammal?
TI would say it's an elephant. I mean, NI would say it's an elephant.
Yeah. and then TI might ask, "What's an elephant?" Right? Like, what do you mean? How do you define elephant? What constitutes an elephant, or is that FI?
No, I mean, I think TI would say, remembering that the communication, speech acts always actually occur between people. TI would say, okay, so what are you getting at?
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Elephant. Okay, what? What about them?
yeah.
You know,
Do you think?
FI might go, I love elephants.
Yeah,
Uh, TE might say, it's like if you're Hannibal, you'd be like, hey, we could use these to wage war.
yeah, right. And then FE would say
SE might go like, let's ride that thing down the rapids, bro.
FE would say you didn't pronounce it right or something like that. You pronounced that it's elephant, not elephant, or something like that.
No, I mean, FE might say, you can tell this is an elephant of a very rich sultan in some place because of these fancy rugs that it has draped over it.
Yeah.
It might know details like that, you know.
The elephant has a status or something like that.
The elephant has a what?
They'd recognize the status of the elephant or how it's perhaps or
They recognize how it's relevant to the status of people.
okay, exactly, yeah, for sure. And then really we've pretty much gone through all of the bottom functions. The last one I think that I wanted to ask about was NI. Like this is actually a really interesting question for me because I'm wondering how NI manifests, to put it that way, in the ENTP and what the ENTP's relationship is with NI. Because I have a very mystifying relationship with NI myself, and I can't really tell you. I know what it is. I can define it from a TI definition perspective and say it's some sort of pattern synthesis, time pattern type of thing, but I don't experience it consciously. So it's probably the function I look at, and I'm like, oh, I'm most interested in knowing what that is for most people because I'm not exactly sure what it is to me. Others I can say exactly what it is, but
when I'm like, okay, this song I just uploaded called Nefarious Plan Song.
oh yeah,
I like the song a lot. I put it together. It sounds good. I like the melody, rhythm, guitar, drums, whatever, songwriting part of it, right?
yeah,
In other words, it works well if you just replace all the words with yeah. And I also think the lyrics are good. I think they're strong lyrics. However, they're about a very sensitive subject. And then when I made the video, I wasn't thinking about the lyrics, man. I was thinking about how I was happy with the song. It was making me kind of dance and stuff.
yeah, of course.
And so then the video is totally inappropriate to the subject matter of the lyrics, which aren't really exactly the same mood as the music anyway. So it's like in each of the nodes, my NI was good, but I failed to account for the fact that when you're going to put them all together.
Yeah, of course.
And as a whole, it didn't work. It's like, NI ignoring is making the fallacy of composition, which is to say, well, I enjoy poached salmon and I enjoy chocolate milkshakes, so I'll enjoy a poached salmon chocolate milkshake.
Yeah, no. Those are very different. Those shouldn't be combined. But I mean, yeah, that's actually a pretty good. That's not really what I expected in terms of how NI might be defined for the ENTP.
It's ignoring. It's powerful, but not wise.
Yeah.
So everybody agrees that it's commented on so far, or seems to say that this thing's got a really hook. It's really catchy.
Yeah.
And it's got a great melody and stuff.
Yeah.
So that part works great. And it's weird my capacity to not notice hugely salient details when I'm in the middle of doing something.
Yeah. I feel like with the NTP, it's more of the whole is the sum of the parts, and with NI, the whole might be greater than the sum of its parts, maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, that's totally right. SI and NE is you can work back and figure out how you got there. You can at least articulate each leap. So, for example, my friend Corey demonstrated extroverted intuition as an INFJ when he talks about Jamie Escalante was the kid's name. Or no, Jamie Estorante or something like that. And he started nicknaming him Jaime Escalante, and then he started calling him Jaime Pace Picante, and then he just called Pace Picante, and then finally called him Pace, and that's how he got the nickname of Pace. So you can walk back into the steps of it. NI is different. There's no steps. It's just when the opportunity presents itself, the gold comes out. So it's like when I was at the Cheesecake Factory and I was talking with Delilah and my dad and Rachel about her two stuffed animals that she had lost as a little kid. One of whom was named Sugar. The other was named like Precious or something. She said, well, you said you washed Sugar in the washing machine, but she disappeared, was gone. And I said, well, sugar's water soluble. There's no steps to work back from there. It's just boom, pops into your head, and you've got some NI gold, right?
Yeah, I know. I can kind of feel my NI operating at times in that way, but it's not really as powerful as I think it would be with people that lead with it. It's like the perception of like and would you agree that it's not linear then? It's processing that's not linear.
Right. It's dealing with things where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if you have a combustion engine, it's not the case that if you just take out one of the pistons that you'll lose that weighs 1/100th of the total engine weight, that you'll lose 1/100th of the total engine capacity. You'll lose the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So in other words,
of course,
things that work together holistically have to have all the parts to work at all, or whereas things that don't have that quality, it can be scaled.
Yeah.
Or, it can be Like for example, if I want to sell apples, I need a pile of apples. But until the purchasing of the apples have made it so I have 0 apples left, size of my pile doesn't matter in terms of my capacity to sell apples.
Yeah.
So that's not an NI matter.
Mm-hmm.
An NI matter is, but people are attracted to big piles.
Yeah.
If you look like you only have a few apples, nobody's going to want to buy them. They just must be old scrappy apples or something.
Yeah.
But if you've got a big pile of apples, people go, well, you must really know your apples.
Yeah. Well, with the NI-TI thing, it's like with the piston thing, it's like TI is going to try to figure out something that is almost, maybe, if I'm defining it correctly, almost just like a piston, almost identical to a piston, functionally a piston, not a piston. I can get the engine to work without that piston if I just find something that's nearly identical or functionally identical. But it's just not going to, so there's the originality of
that's extroverted intuition, trying to find it out to something.
Yeah. Yes. And I always think I can find something like that, but it rarely succeeds.
Well, the thing is, it's like you're a stand-up comedian, right? And you're absolutely killing it. People are just laughing. And then all of a sudden you tell a joke with the N-word in it. You went from a great night, to a terrible night.
Career destroyed.
In 1 second.
I know. That's horrible. They walk a very fine line. I don't. It must be anxiety.
There's a lot of stuff in life that's like that, where there's 2 factors. One, it's a matter of sort of quantity of effort and attention directed towards the thing. And 2, it's a factor of maximizing that which is most relevant to the thing in question. So I think Winston's mom Winston's mom is one of the people who watches.
Yeah, I know.
You know who she is.
Yeah. I'm familiar enough with the chat.
Today saying that the singular problem here is a lack of consistency.
Yeah.
Probably she's right. It's a funny NI conclusion. Your biggest problem is a lack of SI.
Right. Yeah. And there's she's at least able to identify the part in the whole that then is a wrench in the whole scheme, and because she's able to
Yeah,
comprehend the
she's
whole.
trying. Right. Because
Uh,
it may be a situation where, well, this would work fine. Like, for example, my 2 cats ago, 3 cats ago, or something. I had a cat named Mortarton, and my ex-wife's family had saved it. Like, I don't know, a dog had killed its mother and most of its siblings, or something like
yeah.
that. And they kept trying to feed it from this baby bottle some cat formula they got.
Oh,
And the
geez.
cat kept meow meow meowing. I got there finally to go check it out, like to get the cat. I said, "Yeah, I'll take the cat, fine." Um, and it was really suffering. You could tell. I said, "Well, why don't you? What's going on here?" And they kept trying to feed it with this bottle. I checked it and I squeezed it. They had no hole in the nipple.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So,
I
if I had thought, oh, there's something wrong with the cat, that would have been bad enough. If
yeah.
I had thought, oh, there's something wrong with the milk, that would have been bad enough. If I had thought, well, nothing we can do about it, that would have been bad enough.
Yeah.
Bad TE too.
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
why none of the people there bothered to check see if any milk was coming out of the fucking thing.
yeah, I
They
know.
kept trying to shove this nipple that nothing was coming out of it in this cat's mouth.
Well, like with the
Ridiculous.
cat, getting the cat, like to me, if I'm applying TI, it's like, okay, if the cat is meowing, it's not sucking. If it's sucking, it's not meowing. So if I want to get it to suck, I've got to get it to stop meowing. How do I do that? Right? Because it can't do both at the same time.
It was sucking. It just wasn't getting any milk.
Yeah, right. But see that solution doesn't ultimately work because I just haven't checked the nipple, right?
Right. So,
So
good night, darling. I love you. I love you too. Don't forget to dream plenty of cheese.
yeah, so yeah, yeah. I think other than I think NI was the primary one that I was most interested in because I kind of already had an understanding of how the others would operate for the most part. But yeah, I think I would of all the functions if I could somehow alter myself so that I could enter NI mode, it would be the state that I would most want to experience because I don't really that sense of nonlinear cohesion is kind of mystifying to me.
It links to SE. If you
Yeah,
think of SE as scanning the environment, it's the knowledge function that then knows all the things that you're scanning. Depending on how high up it is, it may know more layered or broader truths or patterns. So if it's at the top of the stack or something, or third slot too, which displays is pretty strong because it's an absolute value like conscious scorecard thing for ISFPs and ISTPs. But anyway, the anti-DOMs, they will correctly sometimes intuit something, some scheme or something fishy is going on.
oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and probably be right about that a lot of times if they're dealing with stuff that they're seeing in the actual world.
yeah,
But when they're only dealing with stuff that they're seeing in the metaphysical plane, external metaphysical plane, they have a tendency to overknow, which is to assume that
oh
things
yeah,
not related to anyone's personal experience are responsible for stuff.
yeah,
So, for example, the INFJ who worries about whether you and she are compatible because some astrology thing says you might not be,
oh geez,
even though all of her own personal experience,
yeah,
which is the only kind of data that really matters in this kind of situation,
yeah,
says the contrary.
yeah. I love that. It's like I was born this date, you were born that date, we're compatible. It's like, but I know it's more deep than that. I'm not going to write off astrology entirely or anything like that. But
But
I do have the
the
tendency.
point is, it does similar things. Then once you get past its initial justifications,
Yeah, yeah,
you hear them say, "Well, so you're a person who blah 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 blah," whereas they're a person who blah 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 blah. So you can always sort of analyze those statements, just remove the astrology part from it,
Yeah.
and say, okay, well, I found a couple of statements that seem to be accurate about us. Now let's analyze and see if you're right about what that would mean, if that's correct about us. Because if it is correct and it does produce some sort of conflict, then might as well articulate that. But
Yeah.
the fact is, it's always bullshit. And there's always good reason why the statement itself is bullshit without even questioning the justification, if it's a negative thing anyway, that I don't want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's weird. So like something's fishy going on. Like, are these like your theorists who are going to posit that, that there was some, like, they're going to use cause and effect, but like, okay, so it's like, you know, uh, we've got at this particular point in time, we've got this famine, and is the NI user going to be able to posit like an absurd cause that is somehow plausible, but more remotely related to what actually happened? Like, they're picking up on, kind of an odd example, but there's something they're picking up on the patterns that are underlying the situation, and then speculating about
Right,
what other
but
larger
yeah, but a
forces.
lot of times they're picking up patterns in areas where they can't pick up patterns, because unlike the physical world where you can access uh, sort of all of the relevant data, provided you have a limited enough scope of attention. So if you're only paying attention to building a chicken coop, then you can pay attention to all the relevant data, which
Yeah,
is in the area of dirt you have to make flats, put it on, and all the boards and all that kind of shit.
yeah,
And so when you pick up a board and it's snapped and you realize it's got a big crack in the middle of it, you toss that one aside. You look at each piece of data, and deal with it directly. But if you are dealing with things like news stories, well, you've already begun by cherry picking specific things that represent specific narratives, um, and there's you know each of those individuals, they tend to project their own frame of reference onto everybody. Then, so it's like the like INTJs will assume that they can figure out that there are nefarious um, plots going on because everybody's everybody in life is always using people. They're always doing things for purposes,
yeah, yeah,
and and they always have a benefit in mind, because of course that's how the world works. That's how everybody works. And it's all about what benefit can I get. So
yeah.
if you're
Self-interest.
NINTE, you've got a holistic frame of reference that says this is part of a larger pattern, and you've got a personal frame of reference that says, and people do things to attain benefits. And then you go, see, there's some group of secret people who are attaining big benefits from this, because otherwise, how could you explain all the pieces fit? All
Yeah,
the pieces that you looked at fit together because you selected the pieces and made the picture you wanted.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, sure. If you select each puzzle piece independently to make the picture you want it to make, you will successfully make that picture if you've got enough puzzle pieces lying around.
yeah. And a confirmation bias plays into that too, to a certain extent. Cherry picking. I mean.
Right.
Um,
And the frustrating thing about it is, of course, what they are relying on is the synergy quality. The idea that I know I can't articulate exactly all my reasoning for believing this, that it is a holistic truth that I believe, but that just that's just part of how it is. It's one of those things like an engine. I can't articulate which part of the engine makes the car go. They
yeah,
all work in concert to make the car go.
of course. Yeah,
But of course, the thing is, the kind of systems that are being presumed to explain um, to explain phenomena are the non-extant part of the equation, unlike with the car, right?
yeah,
So, in other words, it is true that an engine has to work in concert to do its thing, so you can't say which particular piece of it did what. But when people work in concert, you can
yeah,
say Joe did meow,
yeah.
and you can differentiate because people are not cogs in a machine; they're independent agents.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And they're always, with any type of social science, like you said earlier, with the school the school lunch thing, people really are with any kind of larger narrative about why things are happening socially, which I feel like is more the domain of NI. It's like, well, you know, all of economics is kind of NI in that way, I guess, because you're relying on the rational actor model, and
I think
kind
economics has moved past the rational actor model.
yeah,
But
it's not so steeped in that anymore, really. But that's with some economists may be more or less reliant on that. But um, you know, it's what about an irrational actor model? I mean, could then we could we isolate? Could we rationality is certainly more predictable. Maybe there are
I mean,
maybe certain situations promote certain specific kinds of irrationality, and we could predict what those might be too. Um, when irrationality will rise and how it will manifest. So yeah, you're right. I think it has moved beyond that, but it does seem, but like you were saying, the whole self-interest assumption behind their larger theories about things. I don't know. It's weird.
well, the thing is this: with economics, I find it interesting. I haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of economists or anything, but I expect that if I were to ask them, as when I ask just about anybody else, what, how do you define wealth? What's wealth?
Yeah.
That they don't really have a good answer.
Oh, well, I
But
mean, Marxist economists would say that, capital doesn't even really exist or something like that. I don't know if it's the same as capital, if they just say
no,
wealth is, but
wealth.
yeah,
What? So I mean, wealth. So
yeah, I know what you're saying.
I mean,
It's relative.
if a Marxist wants to say that wealth doesn't exist, then capitalism is not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
There's
mean,
no capital exists,
yeah,
then
exactly. There's no, if
nothing
it
we can
doesn't,
do.
precisely, yeah. If it doesn't exist, then there aren't differences in it between people and it's not a real thing. So there are no relationships defined by those differences. And so, yeah, definitely. But I don't know. I can't, yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know how much, trying to generalize and see the patterns across, the behaviors of individuals within these systems. I think, would you agree that that's properly what NI is doing, and it can construct ultimately a cohesive narrative that is sensible if its assumptions are correct, and then TI applies the scrutiny to the individual assumptions, and so in that way, NI would need TI too to help it build models that are truly
Well,
accurate.
look, yeah, TI is most native to deductively logical things, things that establish exactly where their reasoning relies on axioms, for example.
Oh
So,
yeah,
in that instance, there's um, TI needs to sort of acknowledge that it it can't be tasked with validating NI things, and I don't think it really attempts to. But the difference is NI is in its most native element when it's understanding aesthetics. So NI people will typically, NIFE especially,
hmm
NIFE is very much at home judging aesthetics.
do you
They
feel as a
probably
yeah
know more clearly and more correctly what's good and what's not good than any other types.
do you,
INFJs, maybe ENFJs.
do you feel as an
But
ENTP that as an
I'm sorry, go
ENTP
ahead.
do you feel as an ENTP you tend to, or you found that you pair well with that particular function combination with the INFJ. Um, is there a synchrony there that you find is productive and healthy?
Not productive,
Yeah, right. It doesn't have to be,
but
but natural maybe. I don't know.
in some senses, it can be productive. To the extent that it's not very productive, is because I'm not. I don't do a very good job of seeking their guidance as much as I should.
Right. Yeah.
Ignoring means not just ignoring my own NI to a certain extent. It means ignoring the
Even
fact
NI
that there's
users.
NI there at all to be accessed, to be considered,
Yeah.
to be thought about.
Exactly.
I assume I'm using. What are you talking about? I got the big old NI stick in my hand right now. I'm whacking shit with it all over the place
I
around
know.
here.
Yeah.
What do you mean a lack of NI? Well, exactly, Eric. But you're not noticing that you're not differentiating between the cherry trees that are planted over here and the pine trees that are planted over here, and now you're trying to um, put the cherry flowers in the pine cone thresher, and it's like you got to pay attention not just to what you're doing, but where you're doing it and why you're doing it. So in other words,
the context.
don't forget, I'm doing this, but I'm doing it in this area here only, and I'm doing it because of this. So I need to keep that in mind so I don't do something really stupid like let's say I'm setting up like this because I'm gonna put the fountain over there. So that I don't do something really stupid like as I'm setting up in the middle, what, maybe I'll put the fountain right here.
Yeah.
And then change plans in the middle of the thing and then go, but that's why you were setting up like this. What, Eric? What? What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's I honestly, to be honest with you, I with a lot of types, I have my anecdotes about different types, and I can kind of like, yeah, that's what it looks like. It's like what the Supreme Court is trying to define porn. It's like I can't
Hold on, that's too honest. That's too honest.
But with NI, I don't really know many NI people, so at least I don't think I do. If I don't know NI, I can't know, right? But
well, here's the thing about INFJs is they are as involved as as the ENTP want to make them, basically. I periodically do little projects with Rachel and stuff, but I guess I'm very accustomed to doing my work the way I do it.
Right, of course.
It's like
you've
it's
TI
all
individual
at my discretion, really. I'd probably be better off to include her in more projects, but then again, the thing is, we don't judge each other at all. That's the thing about INFJs and ENTPs. If they don't fuck shit up early on, like if they don't say a bunch of stupid stuff to each other, then they'll quickly enough learn to be very careful with each other.
Right.
And as a consequence,
they're using intuition to sense the
patterns. Low expectations in the same area and high expectations in the same area.
Yeah. These are his patterns. These are her patterns. We both mutually are aware of these things, so we can unspokenly just adapt, through intuition, maybe. That's convenient.
Like neither Rachel and I are good about eating. Like
I haven't
taking care of shit that we're supposed to, remembering stuff that was. Don't forget we have to, man. We're not supposed to good at that. And we're both very, I guess you'd say, aligned in terms of media consumption and stuff.
Yeah.
We generally agree about most things. Whenever she says, hey, I want to show you something, I almost always like it.
Yeah.
Which is like, no other type successfully pulls that off. Besides INFJs.
I mean, I wish I had that experience more of being able to. Yeah, no, I definitely will have moments, like little spurts of like, oh yeah, he would probably really enjoy this. And then I'll actually try to present it, and it's just like, oh, that didn't fly. That didn't work as I thought it would.
Because most people, when they look at another person, they project their own experience onto it. In ways that are more like rightness destroying than INFJs do.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes people call INFJs soulless, because they're so aware of neurotic shit. Like, how the other person might have thought they meant meow when they said meow.
Yeah.
That tends to be why they tend to be fairly quiet.
Yeah. It's a unique type too, because I mean, it's like you've got your NI Dom and then TI tertiary. So, they usually, they have to have pretty good TI in the third position. So, those tend to work together. I think would theoretically work together quite well, help them out in their thinking about things.
The thing is also that TI in the third is, TI anywhere, but TI anywhere in the front stack, but TI third is absolute value, which means as a value it expresses as what you might call selfish fairness.
Yeah.
So an INFJ
It's
who's
still fair, but it's
poor
selfish. Yeah.
doesn't see utility as being as linking to a person's value at all.
Oh, yeah.
But they understand as an FE tool user that there's accordingly supposed to be certain FE things that go along with it, right? And they they can currently, if they're not treated the same, like, well, why am I the one excluded? You know, let's say you've got 5 people and you only fit 4 in this car that doesn't even have a back seat or something. You're really squeezing to get 4 in there. Don't leave the INFJ behind. Somebody else behind, because
you got to use
that will hurt them most deeply.
Yeah.
So it's like they read into everybody's behavior exactly what that person means about them and everybody else, and are almost always right, but the only exception being like a situation like Rachel's in, where she's growing increasingly comfortable enough to sort of share fears with me, fears of like not having enough to offer or something, and it's kind of an NI thing too. It's like she's worried about me leaving her for somebody more famous or something. I go like, it's freaking nuts, because I'm an SI user.
Yeah.
I see my relationship with her as this, like, finally I've got this fruit growing that's not growing wonky or rotten or fucked up and tastes like shit, or it's like every other relationship that I tried to grow.
Yeah.
The other person was either not the right person or was damaged in some way.
Usually, yeah. Well, both. Yeah, happen to be the case. Yeah. Yeah. But there's one other thing that I wanted to mention. We can probably wrap it up pretty soon. But yeah. But one other thing I wanted to mention, though, or I wanted to say, because I think it needs to be said, I'm going to try to make a TE statement. I'm going to try my best. But the cognitive functions do exist, right? Because, like, I feel like, when we're talking about this stuff, it's like there's this weird trend where it's likened to astrology or something. And it's not even remotely like astrology, right? There's nothing arbitrary about it. I'm kind of pushing a narrative here, I know. I'm sorry. But I mean, I've had to defend this on multiple occasions. People just like, I don't put any stock in that. It's like, okay, what version of it are you looking at, first of all? And I asked my friend, how much do you care about utility generally in life? And he'd say, I do a lot. So you'd say that you have a tendency to care about utility. Yes. So you'd say that tendency exists. Yes. Well, if I told you that I define that as this, right, would that not mean that this thing exists? Or then you would say yes. So then I'd have to say, okay, well then TE exists in some way. We can categorize it. We can say it's there. But I feel like the majority of people just is like, oh, what's that? Extroverted thinking, that's nothing. That's an astrological term or something. It's just annoying. I mean, it's a perfectly legitimate field,
Right, but to get people who are less metaphysical to understand what you're really talking about, you gotta say, like,
yeah,
extrovert thinking is breaking down a task into steps.
right.
You gotta say, extrovert thinking is like deductive reasoning problems. It's like it's like a syllogism.
Yeah,
You get one.
yeah,
And you have to say, extroverted feeling is work in the room, work in the person.
yeah.
Whereas
For sure.
expert thinking is working the problem, the actual reality of the situation, the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
probably we'd be better off if we talked like that, right? But of course, neither of us want to talk like that because we're not trying to. We don't see ourselves as unwilling tasked by the universe to dumb things down so much that it's we want more precision.
Yeah.
We get more clarity through more precision.
Oh yeah.
You don't get more clarity through more efficacy.
Yeah, because just because it works doesn't mean it's true, or they're separate things.
Yeah,
Maybe, but I don't know. It's
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. People don't. It's difficult to get them to understand what you're talking about. But if you're talking to somebody who's like NI-polar, ESFJ, ESTJ, you are literally driving your donkey uh, onto onto the Panama Canal. It's not gonna. It doesn't go there, right?
Yeah.
They simply. If you talk to a ESTJs who are usually pretty intellectually, verbally robust, and you ask them about if people can know things without experiencing them, they take them quite a while to acknowledge that anything can be intuited at all.
Yeah.
That those intuitions, you have to not until you even like you could have every clue in the world be in place, saying this is going to be this, and the ESTJ or ESFJ will say, "Well, don't count your chickens before they're hatched."
Yeah, they
And
use
practically
SI.
all the way out of the shell, and they'll still be saying that shit.
I call those SI rules of thumb. They're like little proverbs, and then they're like, that's the way you have to think about this, and it's just like, okay, no, it doesn't have to be thought of that way, but or done that way, but because I don't know, I made all
my mom always said every little bit counts.
Yeah. Then why do you call it a bit? So, but because I don't know, I have a lot of friends that like do psychology majors, and so we're always like, oh, that's written off, and we don't study that or anything. But then they will study. They won't use the terms or the conventions of MBTI, and they won't assume the model is valid or anything. But they do study the things that MBTI tries to categorize, or cognitive typology, I would call it, because MBTI is it's a part of that, but it's more like socionics, because socionics is more totally dominated by the cognitive.
I mean, what you got to ask them is, if you talk to somebody who's like a psychologist or psychiatrist, and you want to get them to address the issue of cognitive functions, you say, okay, do you have some sort of taxonomy of the ways in which people pay attention?
Yeah.
Do people pay attention in different ways?
Yeah.
If they say something like, "What do you mean?" You go, "Well, like some people can be counted on to make a fair judgment of a thing, even if their team's losing. They're always going to be like, yeah, that was a foul." And some people just never seem to be able to do that. Is that a different way of paying attention?
Certainly, yeah.
Are they paying attention to different things? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Is the replay is clear as day.
Yeah.
Well, if they try explaining it like, well, some people are feel much more strongly about things than other people, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Exactly.
I'll go,
yeah.
You go, well, but it's not the case that it is the case that most people will be consistently that way or consistently not that way.
Yeah.
So, like, either they make a big whoop out of the things they care about a lot, or they treat everything kind of equal and don't make a huge, super big whoop out of everything.
Yeah.
People are usually pretty consistent like that.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Okay. So at that point, you're just like,
I just won't use that language, or whatever.
You just, Yeah, it's like, okay, well, what model are you operating under in general psychiatry or psychology? Psychiatry is a little different because it acknowledges very much at its root that it doesn't know why and it doesn't need to know why.
Yeah.
And I agree with it entirely.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to know why.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the drugs they have that they cured Rachel of her bipolar mania were made dormant.
It's amazing.
They can't exactly explain why that works.
Yeah.
But I mean, they get why like the SRI works.
Yeah.
They
take the correlation as a useful thing to consider in